Raoul should have been celebrated as the kingdom's greatest hero after defeating the Demon King. Instead, he's tied up and waiting to be executed. The reason is Princess Victoria. She couldn't stand seeing Raoul become more popular than her after saving everyone. She even offered him a way out. Marry her and his life would be spared. Raoul refused. So the same people who once loved him turned against him simply because Victoria had the power to control them. And as Raoul stood at the edge of death, he made one final promise. He swore that everyone responsible would suffer the same despair and agony they had forced onto him. The people only laughed. After all, how could a dead man possibly come back for revenge? But then, Raoul opened his eyes again. He found himself in a dazzling white place where he met the goddess of love, and she was clearly very interested in him. Raoul quickly realized that her feelings for him gave him an opportunity, so he asked her for two things: resurrection and the return of his powers. The request was forbidden under the laws of the gods, but the goddess still agreed because she was in love with him. Raoul got exactly what he wanted. 1 year later, Princess Victoria was preparing for her wedding parade with Count Emile Auclair, but before the celebration could begin, one of the commanders of the Royal Order of Chivalry, Sandler, warned that something was wrong. For an entire month, the princess's front guards had been mysteriously killed. On top of that, an unknown disease was spreading through the kingdom. Those infected would become delirious with high fever while repeatedly muttering, "Bless Her Highness the Princess." Naturally, everyone was worried about Victoria's safety. Victoria, however, wasn't concerned about the people at all. She believed the knights and the citizens existed to protect her, and as long as they served as her shield, her safety was never something she needed to question. Inside the carriage, she was traveling with Count Emile, the man she was about to marry. Victoria found him irritatingly stupid, but that was exactly what she liked about him. He was attractive, easy to control, and foolish enough for her to dominate. That was all she really wanted from a husband. With someone like Emile beside her, she believed she could keep control of the kingdom entirely in her own hands, even after having a child. Soon, they reached the Grand Plaza. The crowd erupted in cheers as Victoria and Emile prepared to exchange their vows. And then the ceremony stopped. Blood splattered across the plaza. Victoria turned around, and the sight in front of her left her speechless. Raoul was standing there, alive. The same man she had personally ordered to be executed was now looking straight at her. Raoul declared that he had returned from the depths of hell to take revenge on everyone who had betrayed him, but that wasn't actually where his story had started. Before returning to the kingdom, Raoul was in the White Realm with the goddess of love. In fact, she had known him before he was first sent into the human world as a hero. Her affection for him was so strong that she was willing to do almost anything for him. Even though resurrecting Raoul and restoring his powers violated the laws of the gods, she still granted his request. Raoul knew exactly how much she cared about him, and he used that weakness to get what he wanted. After receiving his power back, Raoul was finally sent into the human world again. The first people he encountered were the kingdom's front guards. They were the same guards connected to the deaths of his men. Raoul didn't hesitate. With his revived power, he killed them all instantly. That also answered the mystery surrounding the guards' deaths that Sandler had been investigating. And then Raoul heard about Victoria's wedding parade. For someone who had been waiting for revenge, there couldn't have been a better opportunity.
It had already been a month since his resurrection, and Raoul had spent that time waiting for this exact moment. Now he was finally standing in front of the princess again. But before he could reach Victoria, the commander of the Knights stepped in. She believed Raoul was actually a demon who had copied the appearance of the fallen hero. Raoul walked toward Victoria anyway. The Knights tried to stop him. They never got the chance. Without even touching them, Raoul used his power to cut off their heads. The entire plaza fell into chaos. People immediately tried to escape, but Raoul ordered them to stay there. He wanted them there to witness the spectacle he had prepared for their princess. And when they tried running anyway, their feet suddenly froze in place. The terrified crowd started insisting that they were only ordinary citizens and had nothing to do with Victoria. Victoria became furious at them for abandoning her. She even demanded that the commander cut off her own legs if that was what it took to save her. Meanwhile, Emile was already too terrified to function. Raoul used his power to control him and force his body into position, pinning Victoria in place. Then Raoul removed Victoria's red dress. His reason was simple. He thought white would look better against the color of blood. Victoria was humiliated in front of everyone, but Raoul wasn't finished. He reminded her that she had always wanted a child she could control in order to secure her future rule over the throne. So, according to him, he was simply helping her fulfill that plan sooner than expected. The question now was whether Raoul would be the father of that future heir. Victoria insisted that no lowly person had the right to touch her. Then the commander told Raoul to face them honorably. Those words immediately brought back one of the memories Raoul had buried. About a year earlier, before leaving to defeat the Demon King, Raoul had stayed in a village called Manga. He had grown close to the people there. From the elderly to the children, everyone was proud of him and looked forward to the day he would return after defeating the Demon King. But Victoria became furious over how much popularity Raoul had gained. So she ordered her knights to massacre the village. The knights knew the order was excessive, but they obeyed anyway. By the time Raoul returned, the village had been turned into a graveyard, and the moment he arrived, he was captured by the kingdom's knights. Back in the plaza, the commander tried to explain that they had no choice because the princess's orders had to be followed. Raoul had heard enough. He amplified her voice with magic so everyone in the plaza could hear exactly what she was saying. The truth finally became public. Victoria had made it look like Raoul himself had massacred the village, using the tragedy to turn the people against him. Now the crowd knew the truth, but Raoul wasn't satisfied. He took control of the commander once again and forced her to punch Victoria directly in the face. The princess's appearance was quickly covered in bruises and swelling, and there was still more. Before Raoul had ever gone off to defeat the Demon King, his sister had said goodbye to him with her husband and unborn child. Raoul had no idea that it would be the last time he would ever see her alive. Victoria even personally escorted him to the church afterwards. That church was supposed to be a sacred place. Instead, it was covered in blood. The smell of flowers mixed with the blood reminded Raoul of his sister. Now he finally had the chance to make Victoria pay for what she had done. But Raoul wasn't interested in giving her a quick death. He wanted her to experience the same suffering she had inflicted on others. So he began to beat her again and again. Victoria was left coughing up blood while a meal trembled nearby. The people watched as the princess they once obeyed was beaten in front of them.
Raoul told Victoria that this was simply the result of her own actions. She was only receiving the same treatment she had given to others. Eventually, Raoul decided the performance was over. He released the people from his magic, but Victoria still refused to give up. She ordered the people around her to kill Raoul. One of the knights even managed to stab him. Victoria celebrated, only for the attack to fail completely. Raoul survived. He had become immortal. He looked at Victoria and warned her that he would return after she recovered. This revenge wasn't over yet. After leaving the plaza, Raoul returned to his old village. He went to his sister's grave and placed flowers near the church where she had died. He apologized for coming so late. Then, an image of his sister appeared before him. Raoul told her that the priest who had sold her had already been killed, and he promised that everyone who had harmed her, her companions, or any other innocent person would eventually pay for their sins. Back in the castle, Victoria was in no mood to accept what had happened. The people were now turning against her, and she blamed the commander for exposing the truth in front of everyone. So, Victoria tortured the commander to death, but her anger toward the commander was nothing compared to the hatred she had for Raoul. She ordered her knights to search everywhere and bring back his head. Meanwhile, a kingdom messenger was already rushing through the woods in search of the one person everyone believed might actually be strong enough to defeat Raoul. Unfortunately for him, he never reached his destination. A group of goblins surrounded him, and while he was busy fighting them off, a goblin king attacked from behind. The messenger was about to be killed when a mysterious swordsman suddenly appeared and saved him. And as it turned out, this was exactly the man the kingdom had been looking for. He was said to be the greatest swordsman in the country. And with that, the second chapter begins, The Forbidden Carnival. We're taken to the swordsman's mansion where the general is calmly having a meal with his wife and 2 sons. A new servant then asks what meal should be prepared for the kingdom messenger. That question immediately makes the head servant panic because the man is apparently new and doesn't understand how things work. The general simply brushes it off, saying the messenger has already gone back to the kingdom, except he hasn't. While the family continues eating, another servant brings out the dish the general has been waiting for. The moment he smells it, he becomes completely immediately captivated. And after taking the first bite, he reacts like he's just tasted victory itself. Inside his head, he even thanks the messenger for his hard work. The next day, the general prepares to leave for the capital and begin his search for Raoul. His two sons are excited about the trip, especially because their father is going after another strong opponent. Once their father leaves, the brothers go hunting, and for two children, they're incredibly brutal. They don't care what happens around them as long as they get to kill their prey. Eventually, they become bored with the animal they've been using as a hunting pet, but the thought of their father bringing home another person for them to play with has the brothers excited all over again. After killing their animal, they suddenly notice Raoul. Raoul asks if he can join them, but it quickly becomes obvious that he isn't there to play. Instead, he ties the brothers up and starts directing the general's servants as they dig around the mansion. The deeper they dig, the worse things become. Bones begin appearing everywhere. Dead bodies are buried all around the estate, and it turns out the general has been eating human flesh. Even the kingdom messenger, who thought he had survived the goblins, was actually killed by the general. Raoul repeatedly demands that one of the servants tell him the truth about what the general has been doing.
But the servant refuses. The reason is simple. The general has been paying them heavily to keep quiet. While Raoul deals with the servants, the general's wife prepares her own attack. She takes a poisonous bow and waits for the right opportunity to kill Raoul. It doesn't work. Raoul takes control of her with his magic and kills her instead. Then, somewhere in the forest, he creates a hologram-like image of the dead messenger and sends it toward the general as a warning. When the general finally reaches his mansion, the first thing he sees is his wife's naked corpse hanging from a tree. His anger explodes. He immediately asks about his sons. Raoul assures him that they're alive, and then he reveals that he was the one who created the scene with their mother's body. The general attacks him with his sword. Raoul barely reacts. Instead, he asks whether seeing his wife hanging from a tree reminds him of Baden Village. That name brings us back to Raoul's childhood. Years earlier, Raoul lived in Baden with his mother and sister. They weren't wealthy, but they were happy. Then, one day, everything changed. The village was attacked. According to what the general told young Raoul at the time, demons were responsible. Raoul and his sister were forced to watch their mother hanging from a tree with her body brutally mutilated. Seeing his mother killed like that awakened something inside Raoul. That was when his inner power first appeared. The general then took the young Raoul to the capital where he was trained. But as Raoul grew older, he eventually discovered the truth. The people he had trusted were connected to the very same evil that had destroyed his village, and the general himself was responsible for killing Raoul's mother. He had even eaten her, just as he'd done to his other victims. Now that Raoul remembers everything, the general tries to use those memories against him. He wants Raoul to lose control after being forced to relive his trauma. But Raoul doesn't react the way he expected. He stays calm. That only makes the general angrier, so the general charges at him. Before the fight properly begins, Raoul tells the general that his sons are still alive inside the state's dungeon. The only way he can save them is by defeating Raoul. The general doesn't hesitate. He attacks immediately and declares that once he wins, he and his sons will feast on Raoul's body. But the fight quickly proves how impossible that is. Raoul corners him almost effortlessly. The general keeps attacking, even though his chances of winning are practically non-existent. Raoul even gives him opportunities to strike. The general still can't do anything. Finally, Raoul ends the battle by cutting off the general's hands without killing him, and he tells him that the feast will still happen. Soon, the general and his two sons are sitting at their dining table, restrained by Raoul's magic. When the general wakes up, he finds his sons acting strangely. He immediately demands to know what Raoul has done. Raoul explains that he simply copied the same kind of cruelty the general had been inflicting on others. He also reveals that he discovered a drug inside the estate. It was created by the general's wife's family. Inside the mansion's dungeon, countless people have already been suffering because of it. Raoul also learns that the wife's family is famous throughout the country for being healers, which means their next target. The general clearly understands what that means, but Raoul isn't interested in giving him time to worry about it. The first part of the carnival is already beginning. Raoul prepares the general and his two sons as the ingredients for his feast.
He starts by cutting the general's shoulders and treating them like pieces of meat. Then he moves to the thighs. The general screams for help, but nobody can hear him, and Raoul isn't finished yet. He plans to make the general's sons eat their father's flesh.
The general desperately begs him to spare even one of his sons, especially the eldest, who is supposed to inherit the family. Raoul refuses. He wants the general to experience the same kind of suffering he once inflicted on Raoul's mother. In the end, Raoul kills the entire family. With that revenge completed, he moves on to his next target, the general's wife's family. At the Altman Resort National Pharmaceutical Research Institute, Dr. Renee Beneke is already conducting horrifying experiments on living humans. She's testing exactly how much of a person's body can be removed before they finally die. She even keeps the organs as souvenirs and wonders what would happen if she replaced a human brain with a monkey's. And children aren't safe either. She uses them as test subjects just like everyone else. While one of her victims begs for help, Renee continues her experiments without hesitation. Soon, military commander advisor Lucas Acart arrives to collect the waste from her experiments. But Lucas isn't interested in what Renee is actually doing. He only cares about the money she's paying him. Then, the supervisor of the institute, Lord DaCosta, approaches Renee with the new objective. He wants to create a drug capable of making soldiers immortal. The problem is obvious. Immortal soldiers would become difficult to control. So Renee proposed another solution. The drug should strengthen the soldiers while also making their bodies destroy themselves after a certain period. That way, they can be used as living weapons without becoming an uncontrollable threat. Renee immediately began experimenting, and Johannes, Lord DaCosta's son, started gathering soldiers for the tests. But most of the formula still wasn't working the way Renee and the supervisor wanted. So they started searching for even more guinea pigs. Eventually, they began bribing villagers and promising them places to stay at the estate, only to use them in the experiments and kill them afterward. Then, finally, Renee succeeded in creating the drug they were looking for. The preparations were completed, and they were ready to put the plan into action. At the same time, Raoul had already arrived at the research facility. The third chapter, Playing with the Brave, a hide-and-seek game that ends in death, was about to begin. News of Raoul's rampage had already spread throughout the kingdom, and now that the general's wife had also been killed at the estate, everyone inside the facility was terrified. Johannes suggested that they call in the military because he didn't want to end up like his younger sister. Renee, however, remained confident. As long as they had the poison, she believed Raoul couldn't touch them. Then Lucas brought up the warning letter sent from the royal capital. Considering everything happening around them, the warning suddenly seemed a lot more serious. Lucas explained that Raoul was taking revenge on the people he considered responsible. When he asked whether there was a reason Raoul would target them specifically, Renee immediately denied it. But Johannes accidentally let something slip. That was enough for Lucas to realize there probably was a reason. Renee tried to dismiss Raoul as nothing more than a traitor who had lost his mind. Lucas didn't buy it. He even told them that if they weren't being honest, he wouldn't be able to protect them. Out of the four, Lucas was the only one who could supposedly face Raoul one-on-one. That was when Lord DaCosta finally revealed their connection to Raoul's revenge. It all went back to the truck they had given soldiers during the war. Before they could explain everything, something suddenly appeared outside the window. A dead monster was climbing up the building. The room went silent. And then Raoul announced himself. He declared that the four of them were going to participate in a game of hide and seek. Lucas continued asking about the soldiers from earlier. Were they Raoul's own comrades?
The Lord admitted that they had only intended to get the soldiers performance-enhancing drugs, but the side effect was fatal and the entire group died. Since then, Raoul had never stopped thinking about how to punish the people responsible. Lucas immediately asked where the evidence was kept. The answer was the safe room, so all four rushed toward it, but they were already too late. Meanwhile, Raoul was strolling through the first floor. He had already setting up the game. Even the general's bones were with him now, animated through his magic and turned into an assistant. Everyone on the ground floor panicked the moment they realized Raoul was there. Then he gave the bones an order. Attack the researchers, but don't kill them. Raoul had something much more interesting planned. After taking the poison from the safe room, he forced every researcher on the ground floor to drink it, and the result was exactly what they had been trying to create. The researchers themselves transformed into the weaponized monsters they had been experimenting on. More than 100 of them were now trapped in bodies designed to destroy themselves. Raoul had already completed the first stage. Now he could move on to the next. But before that, he decided to enjoy himself. He attacked the transformed researchers, especially the ones who had spoken about his fallen soldiers with complete disrespect. They had treated his comrades like worthless test subjects. Now they were experiencing their own creation. While Raoul played with them, he revealed that he had already investigated the facility before making his move. He had listened to what the researchers said about the dead soldiers. That was enough for him. The more he learned, the more people became targets. In the end, Raoul decided not to spare the Lord's wife's family. He would eliminate everyone in the facility. There were 231 people inside. According to Raoul, not one of them had a decent soul. A few minutes later, the transformed researchers finally began dying, one after another. Raoul watched them perish through the very system they had created and laughed. The people he once thought were on the right side had turned out to be the ones hurting innocent people. The real enemy hadn't been standing on the battlefield. It had been hiding among them. With the ground floor dealt with, Raoul headed toward the top floor. That's when it became clear that he had been listening to everything the 4 survivors had been saying. He was practically laughing at their conversation, but he kept himself under control. He wanted the game to be more interesting. Raoul explained the rules. The exits were already sealed with dark magic, so there was nowhere to run. The game would take place entirely inside the Research Institute, and once it started, none of them could leave. The Lord suggested that they simply stay inside one room and lock the door until midnight. Raoul had promised that they could leave once that time arrived. Lucas wasn't convinced. They still had 6 hours to survive, and sitting in one room sounded like a terrible strategy. Renee then suggested hiding somewhere Raoul wouldn't know about, but before they could move, she suddenly decided to make coffee. Considering the situation, that was the last thing anyone expected, and Renee had a reason for doing it. She planned to poison the others and escape while they were dying. Lucas noticed what she was trying to do, so he suggested that they exchange cups. Then Renee revealed that the 2 poison cups were already been given to the Lord and Johannes. She thought she had outsmarted everyone. Then came the real twist. The person pretending to be Lucas wasn't Lucas at all. It was Raoul. He had been disguising himself the entire time. Even more surprising, Renee had figured it out. Raoul was impressed by how carefully she had observed him, but Renee believed exposing him meant she'd finally won.
The Lord and Johannes had already drunk the poison, so she expected them to transform, except they didn't. Time passed and nothing happened. Renee couldn't understand why. Then Raoul revealed the truth. The Lord and Johannes had already been dead since they were inside the conference room. The bodies she had been seeing were only being manipulated by Raoul's magic. He had been controlling their flesh and making them appear alive, which meant Renee was now the only survivor left. She tried to justify herself by saying that she had only followed the Lord's orders, but Raoul had already heard the exact same excuse from him, and he wasn't interested in hearing it again. Renee panicked and tried to escape. Raoul caught her before she could get away. He restrained her and brought her back to the ground floor. He wanted her to see his work before her own punishment began. When Renee opened her eyes, she found herself surrounded by the bodies of everyone she had worked with, but Raoul still wasn't finished. He forced her through the remains of the laboratory until they reached the underground lab. Renee was horrified. Raoul couldn't understand why she was reacting like this when she had been doing the exact same thing to other people. She had experimented on countless victims, cutting them apart while they were still alive, and even performing experiments involving human and animal brains. Yet now, she was acting traumatized by the bodies around her. Raoul had seen enough, so he showed her memories of everything she had done. Renee tried to shift the blame. She claimed the village where Raoul's soldiers had been stationed was the one that deserved punishment because the villagers had refused to help them. Raoul already knew what had happened. When one of the drugged monsters drank water, they could return to human form, but the villagers refused to give Raoul's soldiers water. Because of that, the soldiers died. Raoul told Renee she didn't need to worry. He planned to visit that village too, but first,
she would be his experiment. Raoul forced Renee to drink poison and left her to survive it. At the same time, he gave her an opportunity. She could try to make her own antidote. Renee was an incredibly skilled doctor, and despite the pain, she succeeded. She created an antidote for herself. For a moment, she was relieved. She thought she had survived. Then Raoul told her that the second part of the experiment was about to begin. The relief vanished immediately. Her experiment wasn't over. It was only getting started. The antidote only bought Renee more time. Raoul immediately moved into the second phase of his experiment. Instead of giving her a few vials, he kept increasing the concentration. 13, then 21, then 41, and even more. Renee could still attempt to create an antidote each time, but her body was no longer keeping up. Eventually, she started begging for her life. Raoul simply reminded her that it was a shame the dead couldn't hear apologies. Her body became severely damaged as she struggled to stay alive, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't survive. It took 17 hours and 31 minutes before Dr. Renee finally died. And with that, Raoul's revenge against the doctor was complete. Now he moved on to the next group of people who would send. This time, his destination was a village called Noor. At first glance, Noor looked completely heartless. Two sisters had gotten lost in the woods and were desperately looking for a way home. One of the villagers happily offered them shelter. He brought them home, fed them, and even suggested that they stay the night because traveling through the woods would be dangerous. The girls were relieved. They thought they had finally found someone kind enough to help them. They were wrong. That night, while the sisters were sleeping, the villagers attacked them. Noor had a hidden practice. Whenever travelers passed through the villagers would rob them of everything valuable they carried.
And because these two girls had almost nothing, the villagers decided to take their hair instead. They shaved the girls' heads so they could sell the hair as wigs. After getting what they wanted, they killed both sisters and buried them in the forest. The villagers thought another crime had been successfully hidden. Then, someone knocked on the village gate. One of the girls appeared again. The villagers were horrified. It was the same girl they had buried, except now she was alive, and she was stronger than before. The reason was Raoul. The villagers didn't recognize him at first, but once he revealed who he was, they realized the most wanted man in the kingdom had arrived in Noor. They couldn't understand why a former hero would come to their village. Raoul asked them whether they remembered what happened there a year earlier when a strange monster had appeared near the village. The villagers tried denying everything, so Raoul reminded them. Before the Demon King was defeated, demons had been terrorizing people throughout the kingdom, especially in the slums. One day, two demons attacked a group of children. The children were already helpless when one of the demons decided to torture one of them in front of the others. Raoul eventually arrived and saved the remaining survivors. He also ordered his comrades to treat the injured children, but even after being rescued, some of the children were frustrated. They wondered why Raoul had arrived so late. Maybe if he had come sooner, more of their friends would still be alive. The children wished they could become as strong as him so they could protect everyone, but they also felt powerless. Raoul told them that he had once been just like them. His own mother had been killed and his entire village had been destroyed. That experience was part of what made him strong. He encouraged the children to keep working hard every day if they wanted to become stronger. Before leaving, Raoul gave one of them his dagger. It had been with him throughout his battles, and he wanted the children to keep moving forward. Several months passed. The children are doing well and are preparing to become junior soldiers. Then Johannes arrived, the same Johannes from the research facility. He began distributing the fatal drug to the children. They didn't understand what it really was, so they followed his instructions. And almost immediately, their bodies transformed into monsters. The children were terrified. They desperately searched for somewhere that could help them return to normal. One of the villages they reached was Noor. They begged the villagers for water. They explained that drinking water would return them to human form and promised that they wouldn't hurt anyone. The villagers didn't care. Instead, they demanded money. Even though the village had plenty of water, they refused to give them any. The children eventually died, and even after that, the villagers robbed their bodies. Among the things they stole was the dagger Raoul had given one of the children. Now, Raoul knew exactly what they had done. The villagers tried defending themselves. Most claimed they were only following the chief's orders. Raoul didn't accept that excuse, so he decided to take them on a little field trip. Using his magic, he forced the villagers to walk under the scorching sun. Their destination supposedly was to Mopka village. After walking for hours, they finally saw its entrance. The villagers became relieved. They rushed toward it and suddenly found themselves back at Nor. They realized Raoul was using illusion magic. The path they thought they were traveling wasn't real. They were simply walking in circles around the village. The journey continued. The villagers became increasingly thirsty. Raoul even drank a bottle of water in front of them. The chief begged him for just 1 cup. Raoul refused. He had no sympathy left for people who chose greed over innocent lives.
The villagers kept walking, always believing they were getting closer to Moltke village, only to be sent back to where they started whenever they thought they had reached the destination. It was a loop designed entirely for their suffering. Eventually, one villager begged Raoul to spare the children. Another accused him of being heartless for making kids go through this. Raoul answered that if they wanted to compare who was more heartless, the villagers had already won. Then he appeared to erase the children from existence. Their bodies seemed to melt away one after another. The adults were horrified. But there was a catch. The children hadn't actually been killed. Raoul had created illusions of them and kept the real children safely inside Nor, behind a barrier. He couldn't bring himself to murder innocent children. The group eventually reached Moltke village for real. The guards there were alarmed when they saw the approaching villagers. At first, they thought they were monsters, but when they got closer, it was obvious that the people from Nor were exhausted, dehydrated, and desperate. They begged for water. Unlike Nor, the people of Moltke were kind-hearted. So Raoul decided to reveal the truth. He disguised himself as one of the villagers and showed them the ribbon that had been taken from the 2 murdered girls. Then came the final revelation. The sisters had been daughters of someone from Moltke village. Everything Raoul said matched the disappearances and killings that had been happening around the area. The Nor villagers tried denying their crimes. It didn't matter. The Moltke villagers refused to help them. The people of Nor were finally forced to face the consequences of what they had done, and they met the same fate as the victims they had created. The chief was still alive, even though most of the villagers were already dead. He continued begging Raoul for water. Raoul finally gave him the same choice the chief had once given his dying victims. He demanded money in exchange for water. The chief had nothing left, so Raoul walked away without giving him a single drop. The chief eventually died. Back in Nor, the children were waiting for their parents to return. They didn't know what had happened. Raoul told them that no parents were coming back. Then he noticed something disturbing. The children had already been taught how to steal and kill just to survive. Raoul didn't want that ability to go to waste, so instead of abandoning them, he decided to turn them into soldiers. Using his powers, he sent the children towards a nearby military camp. At least now they'd have somewhere to live and a purpose beyond stealing and killing. With that finished, Raoul returned to the main part of his revenge. His next target was Princess Victoria, and this time there was another major figure involved, Sandra, the commander of the knights who had already suffered heavily because of Victoria. Raoul stormed into the palace, killing every soldier who stood in his way until he reached Sandra's dungeon. He freed her and brought her into his next act. Chapter 5 was now beginning. Love is never without jealousy. When Victoria learned that Sandra had disappeared, she was furious. She couldn't understand how her guards had allowed someone in Sandra's condition to escape. Then she started to realize something. This might have been another move from Raoul. Her injuries from their previous encounter still hadn't completely healed, and now she had no idea what he planned to do next. So Victoria ordered everyone in the palace to find Sandra immediately. But a few hours earlier, Sandra was already with Raoul. Her mind had deteriorated badly, and she kept repeating the princess's name over and over. Raoul found her behavior entertaining, so he decided to use it. He disguised himself as Victoria and convinced Sandra that the princess had forgiven her and was giving her another mission. Sandra immediately believed him. She was completely devoted to Victoria and said she would do anything for her. That loyalty went back a long way. Sandra had even killed her own brothers in the past to prove how far she was willing to go for the princess, despite never being ordered to do it. Now, Raoul could use that loyalty against Victoria. He healed Sandra, returned her weapons and armor, and gave her new instructions. Sandra obeyed everything, believing she was acting on Victoria's order. She began attacking everyone inside the palace. Servants and soldiers were cut down one after another. The palace quickly descended into chaos. Meanwhile, Victoria was still waiting for her men to report back. She had no idea Sandra was already tearing through the palace. Then the doors to the throne room opened,
Sandra walked in carrying a severed head. Victoria froze. Sandra happily presented it as the offering she believed the princess had requested. Then she explained that she had also killed the king's aides because she thought those were part of Victoria's orders. Victoria knew immediately that she had never given such instructions. The people around her began whispering, and suddenly Sandra's actions were being connected directly to the princess. Sandra still looked delighted. She genuinely thought she had done exactly what Victoria wanted. Victoria lost her temper and tried to strike Sandra with her whip, but the blow was reflected back onto Victoria because of the protective barrier Raoul had put on Sandra. That made Victoria even more furious. She revoked Sandra's position as a knight, yet Victoria still believed she could turn the situation around. She convinced herself that if she was the one who killed Raoul, she could become the first queen of Curis without a man beside her. The people would see her as her hero and she'd regain her authority she wanted. She hadn't realized yet that Raoul was controlling the entire situation. Then came the day of Sandra's public punishment. Victoria wanted the execution to make an example out of her. She blamed Sandra for the killings and portrayed her as a dangerous traitor. At first, it worked. The crowd began turning against Sandra. People threw things at her and demanded that she die. Sandra tried to explain that everything she had done as a knight was supposed to be for the people and their protection. Nobody listened. The crowd only became more hostile. Then Victoria ordered the other knights to throw Sandra into the crowd, exposing her to further abuse and humiliation. Victoria watched the entire thing with satisfaction, and that's when Raoul appeared. He couldn't help but find the situation familiar. The crowd was acting as though they were righteous, while doing exactly the kind of thing they had condemned others for.
Raoul then announced the next lineup for his revenge show. The main targets were Archmage Wendell, Saint Christiana, Sandra, and Princess Victoria. He started with Wendell. Wendell had once been one of Raoul's closest companions. Raoul had trusted him like a brother. But Wendell had never felt the same way. His true goal had always been power. He had wanted to use Raoul as a stepping stone toward the top. And when Raoul's village and loved ones were targeted, Wendell was involved. Now, in the present, Wendell appeared before everyone through an illusion. He tried to lecture Raoul about right and wrong and criticized the people Raoul had killed. Raoul nearly laughed. Wendell couldn't even confront him personally. He was hiding behind an illusion. Even Victoria was surprised to learn that the person speaking wasn't physically there. Then, Raoul introduced another member of his cast, Saint Christiana. Christiana denied being a traitor in the same way Wendell was, but Raoul knew that she played an important role in what happened to him. Christiana had influenced Victoria by constantly speaking to her about Raoul. She encouraged the princess to become obsessed with him and convinced her that binding Raoul to herself was the only way to keep him. She also encouraged Victoria to investigate the people close to him. That helped lead to the deaths of his sister and the people of his village. Now, all of this was being exposed in front of everyone. Victoria became visibly embarrassed and furious. She tried to dismiss everything as lies from Raoul and Christiana, but she quickly changed tactics. Victoria claimed she had finally discovered how to defeat Raoul. She had researched his dark magic and found a weakness: holy magic. Dark magic could be purified by light magic, and only a small number of people in the kingdom possessed that kind of power. Fortunately for Victoria, Christiana was one of them. The princess became confident again. She announced that Christiana would defeat Raoul and free the kingdom of his curse. But when Victoria actually ordered Christiana to kill him, the saint refused. Victoria was stunned. Christiana explained that she couldn't obey her because she had received direct instructions from the king, and those instructions were not what Victoria expected. The king had ordered Christiana to leave Victoria to die. He considered his own daughter an eyesore and was willing to sacrifice her. Victoria couldn't believe it. Raoul told Christiana to show her the proof. Christiana pulled out the letter from the king. The curse placed upon it confirmed that the message was genuine. Victoria's entire expression changed. The people around her began whispering in disbelief. The king had truly abandoned his own daughter, and Victoria was left standing there, furious and humiliated, knowing that the person she believed would always protect her had already decided she was expendable. For Victoria, the situation was falling apart fast. Her own soldiers were now following the king's orders instead of hers. Even the people had started openly insulting her. Yet, Victoria still refused to accept that she had lost her position. She insisted that she was the king's only child and the rightful heir. Then, Raoul gave her another piece of information. The king already had 3 other children from his concubines. Suddenly, Victoria's belief that she was indispensable began to collapse. The king didn't trust her enough to let her take control of the kingdom. He even had made plans to prevent her from becoming the ruler. For Victoria, this was the real turning point. The woman who had once commanded everyone now stood almost completely alone. And while the crowd continued insulting her, one person still refused to abandon her: Sandra. Even after everything she had suffered, Sandra struggled onto the stage to stay beside Victoria. Victoria didn't want her there, but Sandra still wanted to save the princess.
For the first time, Sandra confessed her love to Victoria, but Raoul was still controlling her. Sandra stopped Victoria without intending to kill her, and then her own neck was slashed. With that, another part of Raoul's performance came to an end, but Victoria wasn't allowed to die. Raoul took her to the place where he kept the bodies of the people he had already taken revenge on. To him, it was almost a sanctuary. There, he restrained Victoria and subjected her to prolonged suffering, intending to make her experience the kind of pain she had caused others. Wild animals were brought to her. They attacked her body while she remained alive, leaving Victoria trapped in endless agony. As Raoul looked over the collection of his revenge victims, he noticed there was still plenty of space left. There were more people he intended to add.